Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with the next part in our series about Oracle Intelligent Advisor flows and our Hello World example of getting a flow into a Visual Builder application. So I'm in my Visual Builder instance and I'm going to open up the main page, and as you can see I don't have any applications yet. So we're going to, first of all, remind ourselves of what it is we're trying to do. We are going to use a Oracle Intelligent Advisor flow project called RN Hello World Flow, which we discussed in the previous video, which has one page, it has a label, it has an input, it has a conclusion, Boolean, which we're going to display as a true-false value, and it is built using a flow scheme and has one goal, namely the interview flow is successful or isn't successful. And if we go back up into Oracle Intelligent Advisor permissions, since all of this is going to be API driven, it means that we need an API client that has interview API permission on the workspace that contains our flow. And in my case, this is already done. There are a bunch of other things that you have to set up regarding embedding, which we looked at previously in other videos, but I'm now going to go ahead and create a simple application in Oracle Visual Builder. You'll remember that in the previous example where we looked at using a mobile template, we use this one, the Oracle Intelligent Advisor mobile application template. For our very simple Hello World example, we're going to use an empty template, which, as its name suggests, is pretty much empty. That said, when we choose to create our web application, so right now we're on the front page of our Visual Builder application, we want to create a web app. We could add components, we could create a mobile app, we could do a whole bunch of other stuff, but we're just going to create a web app. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click the button to create my web app. You'll notice I have three choices, three styles, if you will. I'm going to choose the simplest of all that doesn't have any navigation facilities, doesn't have any buttons. It's just pretty much just a page that I'm going to display. And now the designer will kick into action and we will see the beginnings of our web app. And that's it. It's a page that says main. As you can see, it's made up of a bunch of HTML and a bunch of other components. It's pretty much as simple as you could imagine. It is just a page. I could take a few moments, why not, to select this and turn it into something a little more specific. Like so, ignoring the warning messages about string translations and what have you. This is just my Hello World example. So within my Hello World example, I'm going to need to install a component so that I am able to display an Oracle Intelligent Advisor flow. When you search for Intelligent Advisor, you'll see there are three. The first one is for flows, the last one is for embedding interviews from Oracle Policy Modeling, and the middle one, which controls sessions, is something we'll talk about a little later. But for our Hello World example, I'm going to do all of that manually, so I'm not going to have any kind of session management in my web app. I've installed the component, which means I can now add it to my web app. I'll type in intelligent and hopefully find it. I'll drag and drop it onto my web app page, and two things will happen. First of all, a box will appear saying Intelligent Advisor Flow, and then you'll see some properties on the right hand side. So you've guessed it, we're going to have to fill these in. So I'm going to give it an ID. The second item is basically the front half of your hub without OPA hub. We'll skip over the next one for a moment and then fill in the deployment name, which I've already forgotten. There you are, RN Hello World Flow, making sure that it is deployed and what have you. I'm going to drop that in here and remove that. So there we go. So far, so good. Let's return our attention to this one in here that's talking about tokens. You'll recall that all of this is API driven. So when we want to display an Oracle Intelligent Advisor flow, we're going to be using an API client to access the interview API that will allow us to display the flow. And how are we going to do it? We're going to do it rather than using a session component for this hello world, because I wanted to show you basically how this works. Let's clear all that off. How this works. So you'll notice that I am, first of all, going to go into Postman for the purposes of my demo and do something that if you've ever called any API in Oracle Policy Automation or Oracle Intelligent Advisor, that's very simple. Before I do any kind of sending of a call to do anything else, I'm going to go and generate an access token. So I'm going to use the API client that I had earlier, showed you earlier on. I'm going to create an access token. So now I know that I can actually access Oracle Intelligent Advisor with this API client. But what matters to the Flow API is that now I need to call the start flow, which you can see the URL up there. And I need to specify that I want to start a session of this flow, and I need to provide the deployment name. And when I do that, I get a second step, which is I get a JSON Web Token, a JWT. So I'm going to copy all of that, and that's what I need here in here. Now I have one final little change to make. I need to change the name of the property to session JWT with the correct spelling. And when I step off this, watch what happens in the preview of my Visual Builder web app. And you'll see in the background that something has shown up. It says page 1, and you can see a save button and a submit button. We'll talk about all these other properties in later later videos, but let's now go ahead and whack the button and open up the debug. And you might be a little bit disappointed. At least you can see it says RN Hello World Flow and it says page 1. Before we talk about the rest of that, let's dig into the browser console and do a little bit of sniffing around. I'm going to refresh this page, and then I'm going to filter all of that to only show the data transfers. And I'm going to go past all the basic stuff, which is all related to Visual Builder. You'll see things about my Visual Builder user and so on. If I keep on going down towards the bottom, eventually you'll start to see information specific to the flow that I just called using the Flow Engine API. So you'll see that a call has been made to obtain project properties. I know I shouldn't call them project properties, but basically they are project properties. And in there, if we dig in a little deeper, we can start to see things like labels and controls. So you can see that the API has responded with the details of the flow that was defined. It's now up to Visual Builder to render this thanks to the Oracle Intelligent Advisor flow component that we're using in Visual Builder. So this can be a very interesting process. You can see how the Flow API is being called once a session has been opened to bring back all sorts of project and specific flow information so that the renderer can then decide how to render it. While we're here, let's head over into the console. Let's do that again. Let's refresh the page again and let's dig into some of these. You'll notice that I've started filtering. I'm going to start filtering so that you can see the messages coming back. And you'll see that some of them relate to the flow, and you can see that it's been downloading metadata because of about the flow. So the console can be a useful tool for understanding what's happening in the background, especially in this case because the Flow Engine API is spitting out some information. Let's remove the word flow and let's put the word control in this time and filter the console. You'll see that there are several objects that have been sent back as part of this, including, if I dig in here, I always get in the wrong place, let's try hard. You can see details about the objects that were sent back by the Flow API, and they include things like the details of your controls of your label. So this shows how the renderer has been looking at the output from the flow and deciding what to do with it. So again, this can be very interesting. Now I'm going to go into the elements and I'm going to search for magic number. You may remember I have a property, I have an input called what is the magic number, and it is there in the HTML. And you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, why can't I see it? Why? It's because the cell, or rather the div that I'm in, doesn't have the right height at the moment. So I can only see the top of the page. I can't actually see the controls, although they're on the HTML. So I'm going to go back to my Visual Builder web app, and I'm going to do something that I really shouldn't do this way. I'm going to do it this way anyway. I'm going to change the style of that div to include a hard-coded height. Of course, I should be doing that in CSS, but now you can see that my flow is displayed. And if I go back to my debug window, or I should say my preview window, I should now be able to see that my flow is appearing in my web app. Just to recall that this is the flow that we were using earlier in the previous one, and it included a logic that said the flow is successful if the magic number is 42. So I'm going to set this to 42. And then I'm going to click Save, and you'll see that when I click it, it says true. If I change it to 41 or something else and click Save, it's gone back to false. So I'm able to verify that all works as we'd expect. Now in this example so far, I haven't done anything to control what happens when I click the Submit button. So in a moment when I click the Submit button, my preview is just going to go wild and do nothing. So that's nothing for us to worry about at this stage. So I can just go ahead and close my preview and go back to Visual Builder. So far, so good. We've been able to embed an Intelligent Advisor flow in a Visual Builder application and run up the preview. See you in the next video.